Okay, we're going to wrap up the discussion about linkage institutions by covering the media, and we're going to start with social media and the difference between the use of social media in democratic regimes versus authoritarian. In democratic regimes, as you well know because you live in one and you are able to use social media freely in one, you can discuss issues. You can debate with people who have opposing viewpoints. You can post anything that is openly critical of the government, and there's really no stopping you, other than just being ashamed or bullied by other people that see your social media feed. Otherwise, it's pretty much an open dialogue, an open forum. In an authoritarian regime, you're going to see that social media is actually a restricted space, and a lot of social media outlets like Twitter or Facebook actually have to follow some of the rules that authoritarian regimes place on them in order to operate in their country. Otherwise, if you put like an authoritarian regime, if you put something on social media, it could be monitored, it could be pulled by the government. This might be in certain authoritarian regimes. However, social media is the only way to participate in the government, and it can be the only method in which you hold the government accountable. It can be a watchdog. So I like these two political cartoons. They both reference Iran, but they kind of depict that the people of Iran have access to social media, have access to smartphones. And if the government does anything to step out of line or to abuse people's civil rights, it's the people that are videotaping or posting on social media that are holding the government accountable and exposing the government to human rights abuses or violations of civil liberties. So it says expel the correspondents. Wait, but they're all correspondents because they all have a smartphone and they all can tweet. All right, but let's talk about some more traditional forms of media. So the press. In a democratic regime, your media is going to be protected by the rule of law, while that could be code law or common law. Could be just laws that are passed by parliamentary acts, or it could be laws, or it could be rights protected by a constitution. The media is protected. The media can act as a watchdog, use investigative style reporting to call the government out for any of its wrongdoings. The media has a role in providing information and covering the candidates and the candidate stances on the issues during elections. Of course, the media in the United States uses a lot of horse race coverage, where they just report on the candidate's position in public opinion polls. In the democratic regimes, media is encourages participation by setting the agenda, telling the people what we should be concerned about, and then in turn we might contact lawmakers to change or provide a solution to the problems that the media has pointed out to us. All right, some restrictions. Of course, remember, if there is an issue with the information being disseminated and it is going to cause problems with national security, the United States government uses prior restraint. It may redact information from being out there that could put us in danger. We have in the United States libel and slander laws, and we also have obscenity restrictions or obscenity or moral codes put into place. But for the most part, we're working on a pretty free and open media. Okay, authoritarian regimes, media could be censored by or even owned by the government, not by the media. Hold on, I'm going to pause it and fix that. There, fixed. Okay, so in an authoritarian regime, the media could be censored by or owned by the government. The journalist, domestic journalist, could be intimidated or killed by government or supporters of the government. So any journalists that seem to be critical or in opposition of the regime could face penalties or worse. The authoritarian regime could expel or prevent foreign journalists from entry. So like with North Korea specifically, North Korea, you have to apply for permission through, I think, a UN office or either another embassy, like maybe the South Korean embassy or the Chinese embassy, but you have to apply as a journalist to get permission from the North Korean government to come into North Korea. And when you are there, you are followed and monitored by government minders. So even as a foreign journalist, even though you are used to operating under a democratic regime, you have to follow the rules of the authoritarian government. And all of this is to prevent challenges to the legitimacy. What the authoritarian regimes don't want is transparency. And they don't want transparency because they don't want to be called out for their authoritarian characteristics. Freedom House, so Freedom House scores are something that we look up, and Freedom House does freedom of the press rankings. If it's in green, it's considered a pretty free and open press. If it's in yellow, there's some restrictions, and if it is in purple, it is restricted. So the United States, free. UK, free. Nigeria, some restrictions. Iran, closed. And closed pretty much to any opposition or outside voices. China, same thing. Russian, same thing. Now Mexico's in purple, and Mexico's it is a particular situation where it may not necessarily be government-backed intimidation of media outlets or of journalists, but journalists have to face restrictions of their freedom of press and their voice and their investigative journalism when it comes to drug cartels, because drug cartels commit violent acts against journalists who try to call them out on their activities. And when we cover Mexico, we'll discuss that in more details. Okay, but that is all of the linkage institutions, except for elections. Elections are going to be a separate beast because there's a lot to it.